Welcome back to part 2 of self-evaluation within the early years. By the end of part 2, you will be able to critically reflect and evaluate current practices, procedures and systems you have in place using the 3 self-evaluation questions. This cycle shows a step-by-step process for self-evaluation. Over the next few slides, we'll go into more detail on each of those areas. You start off by identifying what you're evaluating, any areas for improvement. Then evaluate using the 3 self-evaluation questions, identifying what's working well and what can be improved. Next, you plan using SMART targets and then implement these changes. Finally, you review the impact of those changes, which then feeds back into the cycle to inform future evaluations. Once you have identified the area for improvement, you'll go on to answer these 3 questions. The National Improvement Framework, shown on screen, puts the following 3 questions at the heart of self-evaluation. How are we doing? How do we know? And what are we going to do now? We're going to go on and look at these questions in more detail to support your answers within your self-evaluation. Finding a good place to start may feel a bit overwhelming, especially if this is new to you. But it doesn't have to be. Begin by thinking about something your setting has identified as a focus. It may be a priority within your setting improvement plan. It might be an area that the staff have identified as not working very well. It might be something that's been highlighted during quality assurance monitoring. Maybe an area of improvement identified by Care Inspectorate or Education Scotland if you've been inspected. It could be that you're evaluating against the new quality indicators, or possibly a new piece of documentation or legislation has initiated your self-evaluation. It doesn't matter what area you're evaluating, you can still apply the same 3 questions and the same process.
How are we doing is one of the first questions we should ask ourselves when we're doing self-evaluation. This is the opportunity to reflect on the service we're currently giving, to understand the why or the rationale behind the improvement we're making. This could be a niggle from the staff team about an aspect of the environment, feedback from a family, or a Care Inspectorate report, but how are we doing just now? This is where we judge ourselves against the standard, not just how we feel how something's going or plucked out of thin air, where we judge ourselves against local guidance, setting policy, national policy, stakeholder voice. So for example, if we're evaluating our snack experience, it could be because you've discovered children aren't tasting the variety of foods perhaps you've got on offer, or you've had feedback from families about the variety you're offering, or where they're sitting, etc. Perhaps you would need to take photographs of the area to show what's happening now. You could include your current snack menu, what families or children are saying about your food experience, and you judge yourself against guidance. So that could be the new legislation, the setting the table. It could be the criteria 10, part of the blueprint for 2020. How do we know how well we're doing? This is where we need clear, robust evidence, because this will help us really determine how we know that we know, rather than just making presumptions. And we can use a range of sources to enable us to gather that evaluation evidence. When we're collating evidence, we need to think about the data. This is a photograph of Charles Deming, who said, "Without data, we're just a person, another person with an opinion." There's a range of data we can use, and one of the ranges of data we can use is quantitative That's where we have measures, statistics, something precise. Often it's displayed in tables or charts. So for example, in setting, you'll have a range of numerical data. You might have done a survey with families about their children's sharing their learning, and you can evidence that in a pie chart. Your accident and audit quality assurance has a range of quantitative data within it. The matrix, the staffing matrix, would have a range of data to show how well you're being staffed. Qualitative data is usually expressed in words and descriptions. It's people's experiences or opinions, or it's captured observations, and can be subjective. Here's some examples of qualitative data. So what are we going to do now? We've evaluated our current practice against the national documents, local guidance. We know what our stakeholders want to say. We've perhaps used measures. We know there's a niggle, we know there's something wrong. Now's the time to start planning. What are we going to do? And again, this is where you go back to guidance, looking outwards, looking inwards to make your action plan. That implementation, that changes.
On this page, we have another example of high-quality self-evaluation from a setting in East Lothian. This example shows what self-evaluation looks like in practice and not just in theory. You can see how they have used the self-evaluation process in practice. They've started off by identifying their area for improvement. When evaluating, you will notice that they have chosen not to use the 3 self-evaluation questions in this example. However, they have used a stop, start, continue method. From this, they have identified their plan and how they're going to carry this out. On the next page here, we can see how the staff have implemented the changes. They've evidenced this within their floor book. And lastly, we can see 4 weeks later, the staff have reviewed the impact for the staff, children and families.